Well, good evening to you all, and for those online, lovely to be able to have you join us as well, as those of you who are in the room. Some of you know that I teach pastoral care at a Bible college, and one of the things that I have to try and encourage those who have come to the college to learn how to better pastorally care for people either in their churches or community is to try and help them recognise the importance of being with a person who is struggling with life. You see, the tendency for a lot of us is to move too quickly to solutions that need to solve, to make things better, and often it comes from our own discomfort from hearing people's stories of difficulty and sadness. But most of the time, when we are struggling, we actually need people just to be with us. In a sense, to walk the journey and stay with us when we struggle with doubt and fear and sadness. People who will stay with us when we question God and what He's doing and when we feel alone. Often we just need people to stay with us in the situation we're in, and in a sense to give it value by not trying to rush too quickly to solve it, because then it makes it feel like the thing we're going through is so easy and simplistic to be solved when we know that often it isn't. There's deep pain and grief. Yes, there are things that can be said. There are ways in which we can care for people and do things for them. But sometimes we really just need to give people space and time to be able to acknowledge those things that have caused grief or shaken them. And the danger is that sometimes we don't give that space to people, or sometimes we don't give that space to ourselves. We might just shove it down deep and just get on with life. And sometimes it's because it feels like it's too hard to look at the difficulties we're going through, to feel the emotions they bring. Sometimes it's because life is busy. Sometimes it's because we keep comparing our situation to what's happening with others in our church, our community, or even in the world, and we just think ours is not that important. And maybe we don't feel we should take the time to mention it. Tonight, I want to create some space. I'm conscious we're coming to Christmas, where we celebrate many things, but I think it's sometimes really helpful to stop before the rush of Christmas and just to acknowledge the losses that we have experienced this year. What do I mean by losses? Well, often we think immediately of people who might have died, and I know that that's true for a number of us. But it can be a relationship that changes because people move away. Or it could be that there's a strain or conflict in relationships, so something has shifted and changed in the way we relate to a person, or maybe the relationship has broken down altogether. But for many of you, loss is about your health. That sense of losing your capacity to do things that you used to once do. Living with pain. Not able to do what you had hoped you would do into the future. And of course, it may not be our health. It may be the health of someone near and dear to us, and it has an impact on us. Whether it is our health or someone else's close to us, it can place what feels like constraints on us and maybe a loss of independence. Or it could be external circumstances. I think some of us have been really feeling the effects of what's happening in Gaza with Israel, Russia and Ukraine, what's happening in America with the elections. Sometimes those things shake our world and we feel that somehow we're losing a sense of feeling security. It might be changes that have taken place in our families, in our communities, perhaps how our society operates. Maybe it's the loss of things that are familiar to us. It could be losses that happen internally, our sense of well-being. And there's so many things that can impact that, can't it? Even the loss of dreams, our expectations of what we'd hoped we would do, our plans. It's interesting, Brené Brown's definition of grief is the loss of normal. Whatever the normal is in your life, if there's been a change and a loss of that, that can cause us to grieve. So losses can come in many, many different forms. And it shouldn't be underestimated, because they can really challenge us, can't they? Or even shatter our assumptions of how life works, what gives it meaning. Some of those assumptions are that we have control over life, and then discover we don't. Or we have control over protecting ourselves and others from harm. Or maybe we lose a sense of the meaning and purpose we thought that life had. And spiritually, sometimes the sense of losing a sense of, is God really powerful, and really can he care? Losses in life can shake us deeply. And how we respond to those losses, well, let me tell you, the variety of ways in which we grieve is enormous. We often think that loss will mean we'll be sad and cry. But actually, for many of us, that's not how loss is expressed. It can be through anger, feeling resentful. Sometimes it's just feeling numb. We don't feel anything. Sometimes it's a constant sense of tiredness, feeling exhausted. For some of us, we put on a happy face, go into denial. But the reason we want to stop tonight and just acknowledge it is because it is so important to identify and reflect upon these things that are causing us grief. Because I think the quote, thanks David, of Tim Keller's, I think puts it so well. Because he says these losses, the grief we experience, they have an impact on us, even if we don't acknowledge it. And if we don't properly acknowledge it, it will leak out. Sometimes in ways that are damaging to ourselves, sometimes damaging to others, sometimes damaging to our faith in God. So acknowledging our losses is important for us spiritually, because it actually takes us to the very heart of what the gospel is about. It takes us to the very heart of who Jesus is. Because remember at the beginning I said that when we go through difficulties in life, there's a sense we want someone with us. Someone who acknowledges how hard it can be and sits with us, if you like, sometimes in the pit. Well, I love the description in Isaiah 53 that tells us the clearest way we are going to know when God comes into our world in human form. What is he going to be like? And Isaiah 53 describes him this way. This is how it describes Jesus. It says he had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him. Nothing in his appearance that we would desire him. He was despised and rejected by others. A man of suffering, familiar with grief. That's how our divine King, our God, the creator of the world, was going to be recognized when he entered into this place. What an extraordinary description of the King of Kings. Nothing about his appearance would attract people to him. It wasn't like he was the most amazing, beautiful, No, he was an ordinary man, despised and rejected by many. A man of suffering, familiar with grief. That's who he is. And Jesus, when he started his public ministry, he used Isaiah 61, that was just read to us, to give us the clearest description of who he was coming to serve. And I don't know whether you heard the list, but he says, I've come to the poor. I've come to the brokenhearted. I've come to those held captive, to those in darkness, to those who mourn, to those who sit among the ashes, to those who feel despair. When Jesus stood up in the temple that day, when he was beginning his public ministry, now remember he had 30 years in obscurity, and then he steps out into his public ministry and he begins it, and we're told this in Luke 4, by reading that passage, Isaiah 61, and said, he is the one who Isaiah was speaking about. In other words, he was declaring not only that he was the king, the sovereign Lord, who is now in their midst, but he was also making it really clear who he came to care for. I don't know whether you're a royalist, a monarchist or not, but for those of you who may know, King Charles was here recently, and my great claim to fame was I was on the bridge at the same time as his cavalcade. It's about as close as I got. But it was really interesting to me that when King Charles came, he went and visited a cancer clinic that he had founded and funded. And I had a sense that when they were reporting on it, that his visit to that clinic took a whole new meaning because he too, the king, knew what it was like to have cancer. If you like, Jesus came into the world he founded and chose to enter into the most broken, painful, damaging aspects. And he let the cancer touch him deeply. Let me just tell you some of the ways in which he entered into our world. He came at a time when Israel was under an oppressive rule, and the way they kept the peace was to crucify people, which was one of the most barbaric forms of punishment. So people lived in fear. He was born into poverty. We're going to hear about that at Christmas. The only place where he could lay his head was in a dog's feeding trough. He and his parents had to flee for their lives to a foreign land of Egypt. They were refugees. That would have been hugely scary and unknown for them in those days. You didn't travel those kind of distances in those days. They did, to get away from Herod and his killing of children. He lived in a hidden, unspectacular way for 30 years, working long hours as a carpenter, as he would have in those days, because of the poverty. And probably because he was the oldest son, he would have had responsibility for ensuring the care of his family, because they believed that his father Joseph died early. He was largely misunderstood by most of his life by his siblings, by his local community when he began his public ministry. He suffered constant attacks from the leadership of his own people and the betrayal and abandonment of some of his closest friends. He saw his cousin John the Baptist get in prison and then get his head chopped off. And he himself suffered the cruel and painful death on a cross. Friends, Jesus just didn't know about loss and grief. He experienced it deeply, profoundly, excruciatingly. But this is the most incredible aspect of that. He didn't have to. He didn't have to. He was the king of all creation. He didn't have to. He could have stayed removed, apart, watched us suffer. But no, he entered in. And even as he entered in, he had the power to live life very differently. But he didn't. He chose this way because he wanted to be with us. He wanted to be with us in our grief and loss, to sit with us, to be in it with us, and say, I know what it's like from the inside. Friends, Jesus is here tonight inviting us to come to him with all the ways we are feeling sorrow and grief, because he's a man of sorrows and he's acquainted with grief. And as we acknowledge it, we're going to the very heart of the gospel. We're going to the very heart of who Jesus is. And in a moment, I'm going to get you to get those cards out. You've got a pen, you've got cards, you've got ribbons. I'm going to explain all of that. But in a moment, I'm going to get you to get your card out and to see if you can identify maybe one thing tonight, or if you need more cards, we've got more. Identify at least one, maybe two things, where you have felt the grief of loss. And here are some examples of feeling the poverty financially, spiritually, emotionally, or physically. You feel your poverty tonight. Is your heart breaking? Are you feeling trapped in your circumstances, or in your body, or in your mind? Are you feeling the darkness of this world? Are you grieving the death of a relationship? Do you feel like you're sitting in the ashes of shattered dreams and desires? Are you experiencing despair or hopelessness? As we come towards the end of this year, we want to stop and we want to say these are important things for us to acknowledge and recognise, and to do it in this safe place. That's what we've tried to do here at the Healing Service, create a safe place where you can stop and acknowledge them. I think Tim Keller's reference to the rubbing of salt into meat is a good one, because I think there's that recognition that to acknowledge our grief and losses is painful. It's not easy. It can feel easier just to avoid it. But there's something about us allowing God to rub his salt of preservation, his salt that keeps us tender, his salt that helps us know his love, his grace and his kindness into those deep, hurting places. And tonight might be just a good place to start. So when we come to writing on our cards of something that maybe you're feeling is a loss of this year, something you've grieved, it may be just too hard to do that tonight. And I want to acknowledge that too. And so you might want to start by just writing on your card, Jesus, help me to trust you, to be able to bring my loss, my griefs to you. That may be all you are able to do, but it's a start. You might be able to write something very specific on your card. It may be the name of a person that you've lost, or a relationship with a person that's been difficult. It may be that you write something about change of circumstances. Can I tell you something? Some of your losses go back a long way, and some of them are very recent. Some of you will think your loss seems very small compared to the big ones. I want you not to ignore those little ones, because Jesus doesn't. And I think little losses build up to be big losses when we don't give the time and attention that they need. So I'm going to get you to write something on that card. Susanna's going to go and just tinkle on the ivories. And we're going to give this time. I'm going to come back and speak a bit more on Isaiah 61, but I just want to give us time for you to sit and quietly just write on your card. It's just between you and the Lord. It's confidential. And later on, we're going to come and you're going to get a chance to hang your card on the cross. But at the end of the service, I will just quietly take all those cards and I won't read them, and I will dispose of them reverently, prayerfully. Without looking at them, I'll just put them together. Just pray as I make sure that they get disposed of properly. So it's just between you and the Lord. So let us have time. Let me just pray and let's have time to do that. Holy Spirit, I just pray that you would fill this space with your beautiful, comforting presence. That you would give us this opportunity, this sacred moment, to bring to you those precious, deep griefs and to lift them up